How's it going, everybody? It's artbysae here with my first tutorial video, and today we'll be going over how to cel shade, basically that anime and cartoon style coloring and shading. So usually I start off with a rough sketch first. I do my rough sketch in blue lines, so when I move on to my official line art, it's easier to differentiate between the two. So when you finally finish your rough sketch, you're going to want to make a new layer above that layer, and that'll be your official line art layer. In order to make it easier on yourself, go down to your sketch layer and turn the opacity down a bit. What that'll do is lighten up the lines so you can better see what you're trying to draw. And another tip for when you're doing line art, I usually make the outline of the drawing a tad bit more bold in order to make it pop more. And when you're done with the outline and you're ready to move on to the details, I usually turn my line width back down in order to make those details look sharp and on point. And now that we are done with the line art layer, it's time to move on to the coloring. But before we start coloring, we have to make a new layer. This layer will go under your line art layer, and this will be the base layer. The main purpose of this layer is to make the coloring process easier on you. So what you're going to want to do is pick a color like a dark gray, and you're going to want to color in your whole entire drawing. Make sure you take your time on this part and don't color outside the lines. This layer will serve as the core to your coloring process. Everything you color will be connected to this layer. And the purpose of that is to ensure that you don't go outside the lines when you're coloring, and it makes the coloring process 10 times easier. Now that you're finished with that base layer, we can finally move on to coloring. But before I start coloring, I usually make all my layers first. I don't really know why I do this, but it makes it easier to keep up with everything I need to get done. And when you do finish making those layers, make sure you press that button in the bottom left corner that says clipping. You should see a little black arrow pointing down beside each and every one of these layers. And what that means is they will be clipped down to your base layer, so when you color, you won't be able to go outside the lines. And something I'll do sometimes, if I'm coloring a character that I've colored before, I will import a color palette for him or her so they'll have their original colors. If you do go about using a color palette, I recommend you put it on its own layer so that way when you're done using it, you can delete it and it doesn't mess up any of your other layers. What you'll see me doing now is, now I'm laying down all the flat colors. When you're doing this, make sure you put everything on the right layer. You wouldn't want to mess up and put something on the layer it's not supposed to be on, then you'll have to go back and redo that whole entire part. And another thing about the coloring process, you never want to use any pure blacks or pure whites because they always come off as a little bit too overwhelming. And now it's time to move on to the shading. As you can see, I just drew a sun in the corner to represent where my lighting is coming from. And basically, the only thing the shading is really shading on the opposite side of where the light is coming from. So if your light is coming from the left, you're going to want to shade everything on the right. A big thing that helps me when I'm shading, I always think of the face as if it is 3D already, and that helps me decide where I want to put my shadows. And also, I forgot to tell you how to begin shading. What you want to do is make a new layer over all your other layers, and you're going to make that layer a multiply layer. Another thing you want to think about when you're shading, what kind of environment is your character in? If your character's in somewhere like the desert, you're going to want to use a lot of warm tones like oranges, browns, or reds. And now that you have that figured out, you're going to want to go to your color wheel. Pick a gray that has like a tint of red in it or like a tint of blue, depending on the environment your character is in. And that'll really help your shading not look so muddy or dark. And that'll be it for the shading part. Now you're going to want to move on to the highlights. Just make a new layer over the shading layer. And what I'll usually do for my highlights is sample the colors that I already have on the drawing and just lighten them up a bit. And with your highlights, you're going to want to put them where the light is coming from. So if your light is coming from the left side, put your highlights on the left side. And if you were just paying attention, you'll notice that I made a new layer called the highlight layer, and that layer will go over your line art. And the reason I don't put this on the same layer as the highlights is because I don't want to have to worry about going over my line art when I'm doing my highlights. So I just put this specific highlight on its own layer just to make it a tad bit easier on myself. And that'll be all for this video. This should give you the basis on how to cel shade and color in that anime and cartoon style. Like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And if this video helped you, comment down below your social media so I can come check out some of your work. And if you're interested in seeing more drawings I've done, check out my Instagram at artbysae, and if you like what you see, give me a follow. But until next time, just keep practicing and I guarantee you'll see improvement.